Hello and welcome to Vendor Trash. Is the title a reference to my opinions, my drawing skills, or both? That's for you to decide. Welcome back! This week we'll be continuing my challenge of finding something special, or at least something nice, to say about every WoW housing plot. Last week we went over Founders Point, the Alliance neighborhood. So this week we'll be covering the Horde neighborhood, Razorwind Shores. As I outright stated previously, I think this is clearly the better of the two neighborhoods, so it was a far easier task for me. I find that Razorwind has a greater diversity of environments, that its plots are more generously spaced, that the layout is more interesting, and that the dominant colors are far easier on the eyes. And, I'm probably a bit biased since I'm a Horde player. Like Founders Point, you can divide Razorwind Shores into different districts, though these tend to be a bit less cut and dry and a bit more interwoven, which I generally consider a good thing. In the central area, south of the Common, we have The Bloom, which are the plots you would generally think of as the Durotar-inspired ones. To the southeast, we have Saltfang Shoals, the long tropical beach section. To the west, we have Rune Totem's Bounty, a somewhat jungly area that reminds me of the Echo Isles. Sort of nestled in between these three areas, we have The Bluffs, which are, as you might imagine, bluffs overlooking the surrounding area. Yes, it does feel a bit weird that the region named after a Tauren druid isn't the one inspired by Thunderbluff. I suppose the reasoning is that druids worked to make the jungle area so bountiful. Still an odd choice, but it's okay. I should also note that the three northwest plots technically land in Rune Totem's Bounty, but feel far more Durotar inspired, so I lump them in with the Bloom regardless. Lastly, to the northeast, we have the Ajara-inspired region of Cragthorn Highlands. Well then, let's get our tour of home started by heading to the Bloom. Plot number 10. What if Durotar, but grassy? That's plot 10 for you. It feels very rustic, with rocky terrain all around, including a jagged arch of sorts. There are also a decent number of cacti in this adorable little pond, all for you. Plot 34 is another green Durotar plot and doesn't have much to make it stand out, aside from being the central in a cluster of 5 or so homes and probably the most exposed. So if you want to be in the middle of traffic for your area, this plot may be for you. Also in this cluster is plot 48, which has taken the high ground, Anakin. For real, the appeal to this plot is its relative altitude and the large, winding path leading up to it. You feel special in this plot. And on the other side, it has a decent view of the hot springs to boot. Plot number 16. Yet another space in the cluster of 5, this one is also slightly elevated, with its own rocky outcroppings serving as a natural deck of sorts. And in your backyard, you have a path leading under a fallen rock leading up to the Common. A good plot for those who want to be centrally located within Razorwind Shores, and with the green Durotar vibe. Plot 47. Now this is a proper Durotar Desert Dust Bowl plot, complete with cacti and everything. It's the most alone feeling of its group of 5, which may be a plus or minus. Quite simply, if you'd like to live in the wild, wild west, this is 130% where you should build. Plot 29 is just a bit south and feels similarly dusty, but is in much closer proximity to Ragewater Springs, the luxurious hot springs. Only it and Plot 40 can really claim to be near them, and it shocks me that they are overlooked so much. Don't people love hot springs? They're awesome. This one has the added benefit of its own private pool that must also be cozily warm, given the steam coming off of it. Plot 40 is extremely similar to 29, basically trading the private hot spring pool for this nice bridge nearby, and generally being closer to Razorwind's southern regions. Honestly, it's hard to distinguish the two qualitatively, so I'd think of them more as just spares for when a second person in your hood wants a hot springs plot. Plot number 36 is great for those who love the Durotar vibe, but want a little jungle aesthetic on the fringe. You do have access to the river, but only minimally. There's also a big bridge fairly nearby that leads over a dusty ravine. And it's fairly isolated, with your only close neighbor being Plot 25. Plot 25 has a lot going for it, honestly. The plot itself screams Durotar if that's the environment or nostalgia that you yearn for. On one end, you have the start of a very long set of stairs that eventually leads to the Orgrimmar portal. But additionally, you have this very sizable deck that you can sit on or jump off of into the river below. There's also a much larger dock a bit to the northwest that nobody else can really claim, as well as a submerged path that crosses the river itself. A lot to love here. Plot 2 is great for the Durotar lover that also loves implied ownership. There are a lot of features that are mildly distant from the plot proper, that are ultimately far closer to you than anyone else, so they're basically yours. This includes a deck overlooking the river, a wide path leading down to the river, and this diving board into the river from your backyard. Honestly, despite the dry tile set, this place is all about the river perks. It's also quite distant from any other plots, so you have a bit of privacy. Plot number 9 is a fairly popular one, and for good reason. It's tucked away in a corner behind plot 18 and in front of these cliff faces, but it also has its own private waterfall with a very scenic pond to enjoy. A waterfall which does have a hidden cave behind it if you fly up. A hidden cave which does have a bunch of bone piles in it. I don't need to sell you on this plot, it sells itself. Plot 28 is located just down the hill from number 9 and has a nice blend of beach and jungle elements, as well as a quaint little pond and path behind it. Honestly, despite the cornerstone location, you may want to set that path up as a more elaborate entrance to your front door. There are also some nearby stairs. Honestly, the space feels designed for those who like Plot 9, but want to be a little more in the mix of things. Plot 18 has a lot of those same jungle beach vibes, but with a wide open and grassy base instead. Which, fair. Sometimes you want the scenery, but still want actual grass between your toes. You've got a nice, quaint path leading up to your front door, and are fairly close neighbors with both Plot 9 and 28. Razorwind's Plot 0 is certainly less flashy than Founder's Points is, but it has its own charm. Your property is very rectangular, surrounded quite firmly by cliff faces. You're also a bit elevated from the riverland below, so you don't need to worry about flooding. You'll feel incredibly secure here. But right across the path is a watchtower overlooking the rest of Rune Totem's bounty, and this tower is definitely yours, so enjoy it. Plot 26 is a very special one, as it's by far the closest to the smugglers on this sweet dock in front of this sweet cave with a sweet entrance to it. It basically is your cave too by the rule of implied proximity ownership. You're also at the mouth of Rune Totem's bounty, and only a short swim away from Scorchsong Isle, the party island. Plot number 41 is the ideal plot for anyone who really wants to be situated in the jungly Rune Totem's bounty, but still in very close proximity to the dusty Durotar section. You're not far from a river to your west, and a path leading up to Plot 27 to your east behind your house. Plot 33 is part of a quartet of houses all on the same island of sorts near the mouth of the Rune Totem's bounty rivers, the other three being 11, 17, and 50. 33 has direct access to a small waterfall for one of these rivers and slightly less direct access to another. What makes this plot stand out amongst the other three is its grassy base. So, if you want to be in this cluster but don't want to drag sand into your house, this is your best bet. Plot 11's cornerstone seems to emphasize it being across the river from 26, as they are quite close, but due to the river, it feels more connected to the other three that I mentioned. Of those, it's the best if you really want to appreciate both the beach and the river. Plot 17 is the southernmost of the quartet, being fully on the sandy beach, though not without some palm trees nearby. It's also where all of the rivers in the area seem to flow out into the ocean, and you're one of the three closest plots to Scorchsong Isle. Plot 50 is the most inland of the quartet, and has a great mixture of sand and grass, while also benefiting just a bit from Durotar assets. There's a river on the backside, of course, but the property's two best features are the small pond out front and the rocky archway in your backyard. That's a fairly unique feature. Plot 54 is one of the more isolated ones in Rune Totem's bounty, so much so that it isn't even technically in the district. It's also the southernmost such plot and requires you to cross a river to access. It's got an even longer path leading to it from the east as well. You're one of the three closest plots to Party Island, and can see Plot 24's Shipwreck too. If you enjoy similar plots like the previous quartet, but want to be alone, settle here. Or maybe don't, because actually Plot 43 is located above you and could be watching you at any given moment. Plot 27 is possibly the highest one in Razorwind, and on top of that is on its own isolated bluff, complete with a very near and massive deck and another medium-sized deck on the other side. A dusty path to the north will lead you down to the Durotar section, and a rope bridge to the south will take you to Plot 30. Aside from the height and privacy, this plot also gives you a great view of almost all of Razorwind Shores. A highly coveted space, to be sure. Located just south of 27, we have Plot 30, another private bluff. This one is slightly lower, but in my opinion, better overall, as you've got a watchtower, 3 decks all to yourself, and 3 rope bridges leading to the surrounding areas. There's so much here that's unabashedly yours that it almost feels unfair. Plot 43 is for those who enjoy the bluffs but don't want to be completely alone, as you share it with Plot 12. And you can take a piss on Plot 54 from your massive and nifty deck. You also have close access to the zone's largest rope bridge, so enjoy that. Plot 12 is 43's neighbor up the hill and has its own deck as well, even if it's not quite as glorious of one. It's also about the only plot that can look down on number 24. In fact, you can look down on almost anyone. This is a great spot for those who enjoy the high bluffs, but don't want to be completely alone, but who also want their one neighbor to live in their shadow and not the other way around. Sort of overlooking Plot 32, we have Plot 22, which is one of our 2 last bluff plots. These last 2 almost start to shy away from that aesthetic, as they themselves are not the highest points on their bluff, so it feels slightly mountainous if you prefer that. This is the more centralized of the 2, with access to a rope bridge and a wooden path over the archway right next to Plot 32. Plot 49. Located behind 22 is our final bluff plot. This one naturally feels a bit more tucked away, but it does have a nice view of Saltfang Shoals, as well as its own dock and diving board that's really not very safe, as you're likely to either land on a rock in shallow water or on the bridge leading to Plot 37. But overall, I'd say the main appeal of this plot is being the most sheltered feeling of the bluff plots. Plot 32 is a funny little one to me. It's sort of down by the water and very beachy, but has a very Duratar-esque tree and is surrounded on all sides by the Tauren Bluffs. You're basically the start of Plot 24's lengthy driveway and have a large archway nearby. If you like the feeling of being down in a hole but also want some beach aesthetic instead of actually being in a hole, this may be the plot for you. Plot number 24 is arguably the most unique one in all of Razorwind Shores. For starters, it's quite isolated, with its closest neighbor, 12, being far above you, and its closest neighbor at the same elevation, 32, being absurdly far away. But aside from that, you've got the ribcage framing your driveway and the Kultiran shipwreck that you can point and laugh at constantly. This is such a standout plot that I feel bad for anyone wanting it, because your chances may be slim. Plot 37. This one is an often overlooked standout, being naturally a bit isolated on its own little mesa jutting out from the bluff we were just at. In fact, to reach it on foot, you need to take this rope bridge, and that's pretty neat. And your backyard has its own private dock, which is also neat. A great plot for those who want to be by the water, but not on the water, and who want a rope bridge. Plot 19 is rightfully lauded as the private island, with there being no way to get to this plot by foot, and with nobody else encroaching on your turf. You've got this free little building and fire pit, which you may or may not be fans of, as well as a small dock. Not much else to say. You want your own island? This is where you're settling. A lot of Plot 51's strengths are the same as those of 19, that being that it's a private island, though this one has some Duratar trees, as well as some of those wood posts against the water. It's slightly more inland as well. The biggest difference is that this plot connects to the mainland through 2 little bridges. For some, this will make it worse, and for others, it's an extra little perk. Plot 6 is actually on the mainland, but is still very beachy, with plenty of sand and your own little dock. You're also not too far off from Duratar assets if you crave those, and you're just over the water from this fishing structure with tons of stairs that you can visit. Great if you want a beach vibe, but not a full island vibe. Straddling the beach/Duratar divide even more closely is Plot 3, which is slightly elevated and has a diving board into the nearby but still shallow water. And there's an archway nearby too. Still, if you want to get into an earthier area, you need only run a few feet away up the hill. This plot is good for those who want to have a bit of both. Plot 7 is also a private island of sorts, also connected via a bridge to the mainland and Plot 5, making this island plot a bit more neighborly. It's quite spacious though, boasting a rock structure and several large Duratar trees. If you want a less isolated island, this is the plot you're seeking. Plot 5 is arguably the most social beach plot in Saltfang Shoals. It's separated from Plot 3 by that archway, Plot 7 via that bridge, and Plot 1 by sand, or by this ramp that leads up to Plot 1's deck. You also have that log wall by the water here, and Duratar assets aren't too far off. But yeah, this plot is for the social beachgoer. Plot number 1 is another nice beach plot. this one being slightly elevated and with its own dock. It's closely flanked by plots 5 and 13, so it's still fairly social. Honestly, it pretty much is plot 5, but with the deck instead of direct water contact. Plot 13. Okay, this one was really built up by the guy living there on the PTR, but there is a dock underneath that building he put up. This one has similar vibes to plots 1 and 5, but you're less boxed in by neighbors. Instead, you have this nice neutral dock and deck structure nearby to enjoy. Plot 14 isn't located on its own private island, but it does have its own private island that it can reach via a small bridge. And it's absolutely your island. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. This is the plot for those who don't want to choose between a regular beach and an island and would rather just have both. Plot 8 is an absolute banger, as it's located in the beachy Razorwind Shores, but is elevated on a very Duratar feeling mound that you can access via these large wooden stairs and bridge. And you also have your own deck and stair system leading down to a small patch of sand for when you do want to swim, or just jump off, or take your torchlit path on the other side. A lot going on here. Plot 21 is possibly the best overall at feeling like it belongs in multiple biomes. Like it's clearly part of Cragthorn Highlands, but the Bloom Duratar stuff is right there. You get to enjoy two lovely but distinct feeling streams as well. And, for better or worse, you're right next to the common, so you'll have lots of traffic. So overall, an ideal plot for those who want to enjoy both areas at once. Plot 4 is 21's closest neighbor, and tries to do similar things, but achieves a different result, I feel. I think it's the loss of the two small streams. But this one does have one large river leading to a nearby waterfall, and on one side is elevated on a mound. I prefer 21, but this one certainly isn't bad. Plot 45 is firmly in the Cragthorn Highlands and overlooks Plot 21. It manages to feel quite spacious despite having a serene river, several large trees, and this huge tower that you can claim full ownership of. Honestly, a beautiful plot with a lot going for it. Plot 20 and its immediate neighbor, 44, are what I would call the pure Ajaran forest plots. Just lots of autumnal trees and none of that silly stuff like water diluting the atmosphere. That being said, Plot 20 also has this nice deck that you can stand on or hide underneath. Quite cozy. Unsurprisingly, Plot 44 feels very similar to its Plot 20 neighbor. Except this one also doesn't have any silly decks polluting its pure tree vibe. Instead, it has a fallen tree in its backyard to add to its pure tree vibe. It's fairly spacious too. Choose this plot if you just really like trees. Plot 31 is for those who really like the Four Sisters waterfalls, but don't actually want to see the Four Sisters waterfalls. Yeah, it's a bit oddly placed for me. You do have an okayish view of the lake, and a very pleasant stream with a cozy feeling mist coming off of it, so that may make it ideal for you. But for me, I'd just be frustrated about being so close to the falls and yet unable to properly view them. If you've looked at housing at all, you know what Plot 46 is. It's probably the most coveted plot in all of Razorwind Shores, and for good reason. It is one of only two plots next to the Four Sisters waterfalls, and the only plot with a good view of the falls. It can quite legitimately make the claim that it is the most picturesque location in the entire neighborhood. Aside from that, you've got a good selection of the autumnal trees and even your own private dock to enjoy. And hey, there's even a bridge leading to the start of your driveway. This was my runner-up pick when trying to dibs my own plot, and ultimately the only real downside I could find was that it's shockingly isolated. Seriously, there's Plot 31 across the lake that's kind of visible, and then there's a few more that you can probably see between the trees. Personally, I wanted a bit more in the way of neighbors, but if you don't, then that's even more reason to love Plot 46. I can't overstate how desirable this one is. I'm still arguing with myself if I want to forgo my current choice to snag this bad boy. No, we need to move on before I change my mind. Another one of the most well-known Razorwind Shores plots is number 39, as it's basically the loner plot. Certainly among the Highlands it is. For starters, you have to cross this rope bridge to get to it. Then you have a whole extra path with lights and whatnot behind it that are unequivocally yours because you can't get to them without going through your plot. You've also got a pretty good view of the ocean here. Your closest neighbor, Plot 15, is barely visible as well. If you want to be by yourself, or even if you just enjoy a rope bridge leading to your front door, this highly coveted plot may be for you. Plot 15 is an incredibly humble one. Yes, it has a coastal Ajara view, but it feels absurdly tucked away. It's the closest thing that Plot 39 has to a neighbor, with your driveway starting just before their bridge, but it's actually far closer to Plot 23 through their backyards. I think what sort of breaks this plot for me, but possibly makes it for others, is that it feels hidden behind this big hill that obscures it from the bulk of the Highlands. Plot number 23 is obviously and objectively the best plot in the game because it's the one that I went ahead and claimed. Though honestly, I've seen very little mention of it in any threads I've read. But for me, it has a ton of appeal. It's sort of spacious, but has 3 big red trees surrounding it. It's also surrounded by a bunch of lovely, gentle streams, one of which culminates in a waterfall. You've also got a great distribution of neighbors. Plots 38, 35, and 42 are all downhill from you, so you can feel slightly superior. And Plot 15 is your surprisingly close backdoor buddy. But nobody is too close either, like a lot of the plots in Founder's Point were. Additionally, your house is quite visible coming in from the nearby flight path and on the entire road to the west. There's also the ocean that you overlook, which is also arguably the plot's only real weakness, as that view is actually obscured by one of those great big red trees. Can't have everything though, right? You still have a great view of the streams that surround your house, as well as the stream and road that head south to your neighbors. Plot 38 has a much less obscured view of the ocean and primary access to a little spa thing in the area. I'm not sure what it is. Anyway, this plot, along with 35 and 42, form a little triad in the area of plots with very close driveways, though 23 can also be included as being on the same side of the river. Plot 35 is the furthest out of this subsection of Cragthorn Highlands, located just slightly below its neighbors. Its main claim to fame would be access to this very long path leading down to the ocean on the Highlands side. But importantly, it has a decent if somewhat distant view of the shoals as well. Plot 42 has a nice proximity to both a stream and the waterfalls it produces, as well as a fantastic view of Saltfang Shoals. It's not as distinct as its neighbor across the water, 52, that we'll get to in a moment, but it is a tad more spacious and feels more concerned with its neighbors. Aside from 46, plot number 52 was easily the one that first grabbed at my heart. Aside from the obvious autumnal allure, you've got the nearby stream with a great little dip for you to set up and fish from, and that stream leads into a waterfall that flows into the ocean below. That's right, you've got what I would consider the best view of the Saltfang Shoals below. And then of course, there's your own private massive deck. Seriously, look at the size of that deck. So firm too. I was almost locked in on this one myself, but someone else in my friend neighborhood claimed it while I was still scouting. In retrospect, I'm fine with that though, because the plot has one critical weakness. No red Ajara trees. I need the big red trees, dang it. And lastly, plot 53. In a rare case of logical numbering, this one is situated immediately next to plot 52, so I hope you like whoever lives there. 53 has a lot of the same geographic appeal of its neighbor, overlooking the shoals, but lacks the more obvious flourishes. However, it does have these gradual slopes in its backyard, which honestly are kind of cool. It makes your property feel more spacious. But hold on, because just like with Founder's Point, there are a few obvious construction sites that could be utilized in the future for additional plots. Bonus plot number 1 is the most obvious one I could find. It's fairly spaced from any other plots, and most importantly, would offer another fantastic view of Four Sisters. I'm honestly blown away that this wasn't already made a plot, because how do you only have 1.5 plots taking advantage of this scenery? Bonus plot number 2 is in the heart of Rune Totem's bounty, that feels super ripe for a house to be placed down. It puts you right between 2 rivers, with plenty of rock formations and tropical trees to spice things up. You're really in the thick of nature here. Bonus plot number 3 looks like it'd make for a very nice plot, as it's firmly in the bloom, but has a very wide, sweeping view of the shoals. And bonus plot number 4 is located on the easternmost island of the shoals. It comes with some docks, buildings, and a large wooden bridge connecting it to the mainland. I'm not as confident on this one being made a real plot, as it almost has too much going for it, but I could see it for sure. And that is every available and some unavailable plots in Razorwind Shores. Again, I feel like it's the obviously superior neighborhood, but Founder's Point ain't too bad either. And I am absolutely stoked to start living here. I do hope these past 2 videos were useful to you, though if you're like me, some pictures and a guide actually aren't enough for you, and you need to actually get in the game and run around to get a proper feel for the plots. So maybe these videos were completely useless to you, but I hope at the very least they were entertaining. For this week's drawing, just like with last week's, I followed some very janky logic for my choices. Since we were sort of going hypothetical with Tess having a Worgen form, something which featured in my BFA rewrite, I figured I'd keep going with the hypotheticals and depict Vol'jin, who would still be alive and serving as our war chief. Again, I didn't want to draw Razorwind Shores just yet. I mean, if I ever do a housing tour video or something like that, I'm going to want it at that time instead. So the next best choice was the Echo Isles, which is in Durotar, but I already used that for Sourfang. But I could just say that was Siege of Orgrimmar, except I already used that for Garrosh. So what about just Orgrimmar? Well, spoiler alert for the channel, but I already used that for another character in a video that's coming up in a month or 2. Someone in my comments did recently remind me of the existence of the Darkspear Isles, which, you know, were supposedly sunk in Warcraft 3, but that's never stopped Blizzard before. But we don't have them in WoW, so I ultimately landed on drawing him in Northern Stranglethorn, as that's a pretty major hub for jungle trolls, even if not so much the Darkspear specifically. But they do have a few small establishments like Bombala. I think it turned out alright enough. It's kind of hard to get Vol'jin's eyes just right. The actual model has a lot of character in them, and I probably could have positioned his legs better. I was going for the iconic Darkspear squat, but could have done a better job probably. And I gave him some Shadowhunter shadow magic, which is tricky to do with modern WoW lore, cause like, Shadowhunters obviously aren't using the Void, but what do you consider shadow magic nowadays if not related to the Void? So I at least tried to depict it looking differently than I normally do with Void magic. And yeah, as I've stated many times before, I love Vol'jin as a character and feel like he was absolutely robbed. One expansion as War Chief where he does basically nothing before he gets killed off? Come on Blizzard, everybody actually liked this guy. And then you hinted at bringing him back as the new Loa of Kings in Shadowlands and have done absolutely nothing with that? What are you doing with this guy, Blizzard? But hey, at least they gave him the cover to Chronicles Volume 4. I don't actually think he deserves that spot over other more prominent characters, but I'll take it. I think that's everything I have to say on the matter though. So thank you for watching, and I will catch you next week. Bye-bye, Mon.